once the world transitions to a Bitcoin standard, which is inevitable, they will lose their power, and they will no longer be able to survive, and then it's just a free market economy.
Dr. Ammous, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. We've had your brother on the podcast, so it's only right that we have the second brother in the Ammous family. So welcome. Very excited to have you on.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, we're looking forward to this conversation. We've actually been meaning to have you on the show for over a year. We talked about this a little bit before we hit record, but your backstory is fascinating, Ahmad, where you're an MD and you specialize in internal medicine, yet you also are a practitioner of this carnivore, this red meat renaissance. You're a Bitcoiner. There are a lot of synergies between us, and it's very rare to come across an MD in modern society that really sees this like truth-seeking philosophy when it comes to currency through nutrition, et cetera. So I think as a starting point, we would both love to learn a little bit about your background. How did you get into medicine? And when did the alarms start to go off that what we're taught around currency and then also nutrition really is not correct?
Yeah, so I mean, I started off, my dad's a doctor, and I've always wanted to be a doctor like him. I went to med school like everyone else goes to med school thinking, oh, the science knows how to heal people, and they're going to teach me how to heal people, and I can't wait to learn things. And I go into medical school, and as I was when I was a first year medical student, I discovered the paleo diet, and I went low carb. I cut out the carbs, I cut out the processed foods, and I started eating more fat, and I started feeling a lot better. Not just a lot better, like it's the best I've ever felt, energy wise, mood wise, and it just I started questioning. So I'm eating fat and I'm feeling better. Why are they teaching me that fat is bad for you? Why are they teaching me that cholesterol is bad for you? And I started just going reading on Google, and it turns out there's a lot of alternative doctors that are talking about this. Is that the modern medical system says things that are not completely accurate sometimes, and I didn't realize how deep that rabbit hole is. And it was actually very difficult because I would go to patients that are really struggling, and all what my teaching is offering them is just medications that are just, hiding symptoms and not improving things. Even though I would read about alternative practitioners online that are doing things incredible, fixing people through diet and stuff. And it was a big struggle because at a certain point I thought maybe I should just quit med school and learn things on my own. But I stuck with it, and I'm glad that I stuck with it. And I took the free time to just learn about things that actually do help people.
You were saying you kind of felt disenfranchised or disheartened by the medical schooling that you were receiving. And looking back, like there's a lot of the changes that have happened in terms of the industrialization of basically everything is fascinating, but schooling is one where we're now really teaching, and this is really across the board. Like when I look at the agriculture schools, we're now teaching them how to basically just use chemicals on fields as opposed to how to use nature within itself to create food. And the schooling system in general across the board has just really become a place where you can't challenge the status quo as much. I'm wondering, do you have any experience just like bringing some of the things that you were learning on your own with your own diet and lifestyle to the table in medical school and actually like voicing some of those concerns like, hey, this is actually something that I'm experiencing very contrary to what you guys are teaching us?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it started off with just I was feeling the best I ever felt, and I wanted to just tell my fellow medical students, "Oh, this is what I'm doing." They're like, "You're crazy. Why are you eating more fat? It's bad for you." And that was just very disheartening because it's making me feel good. There's no way you can tell me it's bad for me, and I don't care what your PubMed research shows. But in general, the sort of culture there is in medical schools, in all of education, but especially in medical schools, is that you don't ask questions. This is what you're given, you study it, you memorize it, and this is what gets you the grades, and this is what gets you to progress in medical school. The issue is that why most physicians have a difficulty when they start practicing is because all these things that you're taught are not really helping patients. And so your patients come to you and you're giving them all of this bullshit advice about, just take more pills. And it's not really helping them. And they keep coming back and they're very frustrated because you're not addressing the root cause of it. And so a lot of physicians go into medicine thinking, oh, okay, if I learn all this pharmacology and all this drug therapy, I'm going to be able to help my patients. But then when they actually go into practice, they realize that it's not doing anything. And that's why a lot of them end up just wanting to pursue money. And that's how modern medicine is right now.
I think it's a great depiction of what's gone on the last 50 years. I'm personally, Harry and I are both happy that you didn't end up dropping out and you decided to get your credentials, because the space needs MDs that are credentialed, that are speaking about addressing the root causes of why we get sick in the first place. I think a great example, right, is, Harry and I know a lot about nutrition. Parents are very difficult, right, to influence and persuade. And so even though they see something working with their son, they're not going to listen to me because I'm, a byproduct of them. Whereas if I point them in your direction, who's an MD that's trained, that has the clinical experience, that's talking about being diet, actually a root cause of being able to cure some of this stuff, they're so much more likely to actually listen to that. So I think it takes both of those forces, credentialized people like you, and then almost like informed consumers like us that are preaching a similar message, but we can attract different pockets of audiences. I'm so intrigued by how your colleagues and peers perceived you while you were doing paleo, because my thought process would be, okay, you're an MD, you're practicing science. If you have a peer that is following an unconventional diet, yet they're feeling the best that they've ever felt and their biomarkers are good, you'd think that they would be curious to maybe try something on their own, but it sounds like it was the exact opposite for you, right?
It was the exact opposite. I mean, this is not just with my peers, with everyone. With everyone, you can't go in and try to change people's minds. If they want to hear the message, they will come to you, and that's sort of this realization that I made when I first fixed my lifestyle. It really just, every second of my day, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like a new human being. And I really want to just, everyone I know, I want to change them to this. But it was just draining because nobody wants to listen. And at the end of the day, I just realized if people are interested, they will come to me. And unfortunately, with medicine, the medical students and doctors in general are some of the least questioning people that I know. It sort of attracts the sort of people that, just follow instructions, are good at just learning and memorizing. And it doesn't attract many like problem solving and discovering on your own. So doctors just want to follow whatever the guidelines tell them, and they don't want to question the narrative.
How much of this current medical schooling system is driven by just top-down thinking from either big multinational corporations funding studies, or governments who have vested interest in, like, just not like having doctors, but having doctors who are also supporting the greater system? Like, how much of this is a product of just really having a system that is so, it's like broken capitalism kind of fueling a lot of like these like sterilized thinkings in this like very basic thinking approach. Like I can't really think of another way to say it other than just like this industrialized process of, like, you get into medical school, you memorize certain things. It sounds like this is your experience where, not able to really question certain things happening, and then you get out and you're really prescribing you're prescribing instead of trying to find the root cause. So I'm curious, do you think it's like a systemic thing that's coming from top down? That's like what's the driver there?
Yeah, and definitely. And I'm lucky in that I have my brother to sort of guide me in understanding this. But mainly the way it happened is so like 1800s, there were all kinds of medical schools. There was what we perceive of as modern medical schools, which are mainly based on pharmacology and drug therapy. There were other sort of medical schools, one's concerned with naturopathy, one's concerned with homeopathy, one concerned with like natural healing. And there was all sorts of medical schools and uh, different approaches to healing people. In 1910, the AMA, the American Medical Association, hired this guy, Flexner, and they asked him to write a report basically analyzing how medical education is in the US. Uh, this was their publicized goal and to make the medical education more scientific. But in reality, what the purpose of this was is Flexner was funded by Rockefeller, and Rockefeller was heavily invested in a lot of the pharmaceutical companies at that point because the pharmaceutical companies used his uh, products from the oil industry. So he wanted to make pharmaceutical medicine the standard of care. So all of the medical schools that were teaching non-pharmaceutical medicines were basically declared illegal and they were shut down. So most of the medical schools were closed at that point, and only medical schools teaching drug therapy were allowed. And so that's how the problem started, where you are you are dictating to physicians what sort of learning they would get, and you're dictating to patients what sort of physicians they can go to. And this is where the problem, this is why we are at that point where we are now. Uh, it's all centrally planned that you need to see only a certain kind of physician, a certain kind of healing therapy. And all the other schools have basically been forgotten or are only fringe schools at that point, at this point.
It's actually it's a genius move by Rockefeller and Carnegie because they figured out, oh, we can make synthetic vitamins and minerals from petroleum. So let me create this type of medicine where I diagnose them as being sick and then I give them vitamins to be able to actually cure whatever maladies that they're having. And I think at the time, 1 out of 10 deaths were caused by chronic disease. And now I think it's 7 out of 10 deaths are caused by chronic disease that are really food-driven illnesses. And I think what I've been fascinated by being on Twitter and deep diving everything the last 2 years is it almost seems like there are a handful of stories of what have happened over the last 100 years that almost paint the picture of why we're as sick as we are. I think Flexner is a great one. I think Ansel Keys is a great one. Harry, who was the guy that essentially like made farms go really big as well? What was his name? Earl Butts. And I remember thinking, like, is it actually true that a number of these stories are really what's causing 88% of Americans to be metabolically unhealthy? But the further and further we research between the three of us, I think that's absolutely the case. And something that your brother very famously said in our podcast is that you could essentially wipe your ass with most epidemiological studies and even peer-reviewed studies. And then when you find out that sugar companies are donating 11 times the amount of money to these universities as the NIH, it doesn't become that far-fetched.
100%. And it's all centrally produced propaganda. And it's just, this is how it is in medicine. Classically, I mean, the way classical teachings of medicine, like the way Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine looked at healing, is that each case is different from another case. Even if it's the same disease in the same person, the healing, the way you're going to treat them is different. And so that model doesn't apply with epidemiological studies and even randomized control studies with medicine. And that's also part of the reason why modern medicine just doesn't make sense for patients.
Yeah, I would say that that's absolutely true. And Ahmad, one of the things I wanted to ask you, it seems like it's very difficult from a consumer perspective to differentiate between a good study versus a bad study. I feel like social media kind of allows you to take a snippet of a headline, stevia linked to infertility, or red meat incredibly inflammatory and causes cancer. And you can just repost that to Instagram and Twitter, and it goes insanely viral. And then we become skeptical of certain products. I'm curious, is there a gold standard? Are there metrics of things that you look for, whether you're determining whether a study is good or not, like as a consumer to inform ourselves?
Honestly, my go-to is just listening to people's stories. If people are posting and saying this is making them feel better, I trust that a lot more than any study. And also, the most important thing that modern medicine, one of the biggest enemies of modern medicine is that they don't want you to have any more personal autonomy over your body. Uh, the best measure of if something's effective or harmful for you is how it makes you feel. And once you get to that point, you don't need a doctor. You just have yourself, and you have your reason, and you have your body, and you have how you feel. Modern medicine gives us the idea that no, it's all too complicated and don't listen to yourself. But no, this is the best measure. See how it feels on yourself.
Yeah, that's something Brett and I talk a lot about, is just the idea of self-experimentation and being the N of one. There's so much noise. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is in Japan, they don't even let studies get published that aren't done specifically on the Japanese population, which I think is a great practice and something that maybe like, you know, unique to them. But in the US, there is so much noise with these studies. And one of the things that I've also find interesting is just the number of studies that have been published over the last 40 years. Like in 1980, there was 1 million studies published. And then 20 years later, there's 7 million published studies. And in that time period, our health has only gotten worse. So in my opinion, there's just this information gatekeeping that's happening to almost create this illusion of confusion, and making people think that they don't know these answers, that somebody with authority needs to give them the answers to their own health problems, when there's a deep intuition that we understand innately of whether or not things are healthy for us and not.
Yeah, the darkest part of this is that out of all my friends, probably my physician friends are the ones least in tune to their bodies. And that just tells you everything you need to know. Because they're raised in this environment where health is something that's sort of, you're just born with. It's either a genetic disease or something that you get, and nothing you do in your lifestyle affects it. And so it's just something out there that's not my responsibility. And that's how they treat themselves. And so even when patients that, some patients read online and they tell us, they come to doctors and they tell them, I've read that doing this diet can help with this. They're like, no, 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 don't, just take your pills, basically.
Yeah, I would definitely mirror that own sentiment in my own personal experience, because when I initially got sick and diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, my doctor literally told me that this is not diet and lifestyle related. You had a genetic predisposition to getting this disease, so no matter what you did, you probably would have gotten sick. Meanwhile, I'm binge drinking alcohol, I'm eating a ton of processed foods, I'm chronically stressed out. I was the perfect case study to get diagnosed with that disease, and I was just blanket put on biologic drugs. Granted, I was so inflamed that I probably needed them at that point, but had I not taken control of my own health and gone carnivore, I would still be on those drugs right now, getting a blood infusion every 8 weeks. And in the 3 year period that I had gone carnivore, I would go back for checkups and my blood work would be better. I would look better. I would have more muscle. The inflammatory markers were improving. And I would literally say to him, do you want me to give you the playbook of what I've been doing? Because I think it could be helpful to your other patients. And he's a good guy, but he didn't have any interest. And I don't even think it's his own fault. It's like he's just a byproduct of that system that you're talking about. Meanwhile, I think a doctor like you would be like, oh, wow, I actually have a patient that's doing something against the grain and he's actually healing and he got off of his biologic drugs. Maybe I could apply that to my other patients. It's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's fascinating when you read about physicians historically. That's basically how they used to learn. They used to start practicing at a very young age. And people would just come to them and tell them, uh, this is what was wrong with me, and I tried this and it fixed me. So now you know that there's a certain cure for this thing. And then the next guy comes in and tells you something else. And that's how you add to your knowledge. It's so far removed from how medicine is right now. It's sad.
There's even sorry, Harry, I know you were about to speak. I was going to add one point. Even this negative programming around the fact that these diseases are incurable, right? I remember being told that when I was 21, that you will have to be on this medication for the rest of your life because this is incurable. Flash forward 2 years of strict carnivore, I get a colonoscopy, zero inflammation, zero microinflammation. I'm like, that's the definition of being medically cured. He would never tell me that. He allowed me to get off biologic drugs, but it's so interesting how they don't even allow you to be medically cured. Even the founder of Hue Chocolate, Jason Karp, he came from the hedge fund space and worked himself to death to the point where he developed some degenerative eye disease. And so he did a strict paleo diet in the late 90s, retested, right? Because they test your vision to make sure that he's not going blind. He had a perfect 20/20 score. And the doctor literally said to him, oh, we must have misdiagnosed you, right? So that's just this perpetual loop of negative self-programming. And people think that they're never going to be able to heal, even though they lean into the foods that you're talking about. You can literally get off these medications and be in the best health of your life.
They don't want you to be cured because they want you a customer forever.
Ahmad, what upsets you the most about the current medical establishment?
Yeah, I mean, probably that we do more harm than benefit. This is the saddest thing. Like, there are people that, so I work in a hospital, I'm a hospitalist. My job is to try and I manage people while they're in the hospital. And my best therapy for getting people to get better is just try and get them home as soon as possible. Because the longer they are in the hospital, the more things we discover, the more treatments we give them, and the more complications they get. And they're just in this loop. And I mean, it's you have to really zoom out. And most doctors, because they're so in the system, they don't actually realize this. But basically, most of the problems you're dealing with are iatrogenic, caused by us, by something we've done before. So it starts off by a stupid thing where you give them you check their blood work, their cholesterol is elevated, which doesn't mean anything. And you put them on a statin medication. And that causes them some problems with, say they get diabetic. They get diabetic, you need to do surgery because they have a gangrenous foot. They get more complications from the gangrenous foot. And that's it's just a perpetual never-ending cycle. And the system benefits from it, makes a lot of money, then the patients struggle.
That's a really good depiction. Sorry, Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it makes me think about, I don't know if you've heard this speech before, but Dwight Eisenhower had a speech where he talked about the scientific, technological elite capturing so much of the narrative and the power within the public policy space where they're able to just completely control the system. And I think it was incredible foreshadowing, and we're living through that time period, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's quite sad. I mean, the bright spot is that we have Bitcoin now, and this is kind of my message. Is, I mean, it's very dark, but the way the entire system is run, the way the entire system is funded, is that there's this Federal Reserve that can print money out of nowhere. And it's the Federal Reserve that is funding associations like the American Medical Association or the American Dialectics Association. And these are the ones that are able to, through their money, through their publications, through the laws that the government controls, they're the ones that are able to, put an alternative practitioner in jail for practicing something that's not pharmaceutical. Shutting people's clinics down for not teaching the right thing, etc. And these people are only able to survive because there's a fake money printer keeping them alive. And once the world transitions to a Bitcoin standard, which is inevitable, they will lose their power, and they will no longer be able to survive. And then it's just a free market economy.
Hmm. Ahmad, I know you had mentioned earlier that one of your breakthrough moments was actually rewiring your diet through a paleo approach and almost feeling like your brain was turning on and feeling the best that you had ever felt. I find that for a lot of people, they go Bitcoin first, carnivore second. I was a little unique where I went carnivore first, Bitcoin second. Was it paleo that turned you on to Bitcoin, or were you a Bitcoiner first and then you started playing around with your nutrition?
I think so. This was all. So I'm lucky. I have an 11-year-old brother that's 11 years older than me, and so he basically tests everything, and he just tells me what I need to do. So he went down the low carb rabbit hole before. He was a gold bug at that point, and then he found Bitcoin. But they're it's very easy to see why they're linked together, because once you understand fiat, you just can't unsee it, and you start to see it everywhere in your life.
Do you think it's fair to say that beef is the nutritional equivalent of Bitcoin?
Yes.
Yeah, we had Robert Breedlove say that on our podcast, and I thought that was such an amazing analogy. But the thing is that, we could spend 4 hours talking about why we're in the current situation. But I think what Harry and I have been trying to do, and I think guys like you are trying to do, is make you understand that you do have this sphere of influence over yourself, which can be far more powerful than you realize. And for me, it was eating these really nutrient dense foods, feeling like the lights were turning on for the first time, getting my testosterone, my hormone levels, to be the best that they had ever been. And I noticed, oh, I'm thinking for myself, oh, I don't want to work this fiat job anymore. Oh, I'm going to learn about Bitcoin. I'm going to buy some Bitcoin. So it's this amazing asset for my family. And I think that's what's so encouraging, is understanding that there are these tools that are accessible to everyone to almost bulletproof ourselves from the fiat bullshit that exists in the outside world. And I think that should give everyone hope too.
100%. I think, I mean, a lot of our health issues too is that people don't have time to take care of themselves, which is also a manifestation of, being in a fiat job and working so many hours. Because if our money wasn't being inflated so badly every year, we won't have to work 80 hours a week. It's only because of inflation and because of fiat money. And once you get rid of that, once everyone is a Bitcoiner, you'll have more time to take care of these things, to take care of your body, to take care of your family, and that's very empowering as well.
Yeah, Ahmad, for someone who's just getting introduced to Bitcoin, I think there's a lot of hurdles to get over in terms of fully comprehending it. And honestly, I think most people, it's similar to food, whereas people use money every single day and have no idea what real hard money is. People eat food every single day, and a lot of times people don't even realize what the food is that they're putting into their body. And so, were there any hurdles for you in terms of wrapping your brain around Bitcoin and what it actually is? I know Saifedean is probably the best person you could possibly have in your corner in terms of understanding Bitcoin, but what hurdles did you need to get over?
I mean, the main thing is that it's indestructible. That's something most people struggle to understand, is that nobody can stop Bitcoin. It's going to survive whether you like it or not. At this point, imagining a scenario where Bitcoin doesn't survive is just very, very difficult to wrap our heads around. So that's one of the main ones. The other thing, yeah, the other difficulty I had is, understanding what money is, in that money doesn't have to be something declared by government. Money just has to be something that two people agree that we're going to transact in. So it doesn't have to be a government that approves how me and you interact, because we can interact in any way we want. And that's another thing that basically fiat education has implemented that idea in our head, and it's useful to snap out of it.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with, I'm going to throw him under the bus, my brother, the other day. He's not a Bitcoiner and was asking me a lot of good questions. It was actually a really great conversation. But one of the things that he ended up saying, which I adamantly disagree with, is inflation is good.
Yeah.
And I think when you live in the era of infinite money printing, capital can get placed without any sort of accountability. And that's what we're living through. We're living through a period of time where risk has been brought down, the risk-free rate has been brought down to zero, and capital allocation is inconsequential in a lot of ways for many people. And so I think when you look at inflation, it's actually stealing our time away. I think you said it perfectly. And it's not only stealing our time away, it's um, eroding our health within the current system. So, I'm curious your thoughts on this idea that inflation is inherently good, because in most economic schools, there's this idea that inflation is just kind of this natural thing that happens, like prices just go up. And that's in a healthy economy, I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Yeah, I mean, I took some economics in college, and their rationalization for this is just a couple of stupid graphs that they show you and a couple of models that they show. But I mean, the you just look at the incentives, and the incentives is they want to teach you this so that they are able to print as much money as they want. And that's just, once you understand it that way, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I would liken inflation almost to our understanding of inflation almost being similar to like this aversion to LDL cholesterol and things like that. Like we've just been taught through these very specific parameters. And then when you actually do the research and think for yourself and understand what the truth is, there's no longer fear to that.
Yeah. Yeah, the analogies in medicine are quite incredible about how many things are taken for granted. And then once you dissect them, they're just all, there's just no basis for them.
Hmm.
It's endless.
Yeah, it is endless. Ahmad, what is how are you viewed by peers and colleagues being public and advocating for carnivory and Bitcoin and all the things that you love to talk about?
Yeah, I don't have that many Fiat doctor friends, thankfully.
Love
Uh,
that.
yeah, the ones that I work with, I don't talk about these things at work. It's just it's completely the hospital is probably some of the probably the unhealthiest environment to be in is the hospital for patients and for people that work there. So you're under artificial light all day, no fresh air. In the workroom, in where I work, there's always like cookies and chocolates, and doctors are just snacking on them all day. They come in at 8 a.m. and they have a donut, you know. So it's something I don't like talking about. They make fun of, oh, this guy just doesn't eat sugar and doesn't eat bread, and I joke about it, and then we just, yeah, okay, do whatever you want. I'm gonna do me, and they keep complaining about gaining weight and being unhealthy and unfit, and they also complain about, oh, this guy is weird because he doesn't eat sugar. So, but I mean, there's no point in arguing with them. And it's more difficult with physicians because like there's nothing in their curriculum that says anything about being healthy, and health being healthy involves fixing their diet. So, well, if my boss and my textbook don't say anything about diet, then why should I be concerned?
Hmm.
And it's that limiting, unfortunately.
I, I would just think that if I was a fellow MD and I was 30 pounds overweight, and I see this other colleague that I have who's in amazing shape, who's got great blood work, who's doing things differently, I would want to learn from that person. It reminds me a lot of when I first went carnivore, I was working a fintech job in New York City. And I would literally be working with engineers that had degrees from MIT, Stanford, Harvard, that would look at me eating a pound of steak, being like, dude, you're going to literally kill yourself and have a heart attack. Meanwhile, they're eating insomnia cookies and drinking Mountain Dew for lunch. It's just, it's so fascinating. You would just think that they would want to observe from the person who is clearly healthier than they are, but they just go deeper and deeper into their own rabbit hole.
It's indoctrination at such a level. It's mind. Everyone's is mind washed. It's everyone's brainwashed to such an extent that they don't see it in front of them. And at a certain point, you can't spend your effort at people like that. You have to move on and talk to the people that are interested in learning.
Mm.
Ahmad, how do you see this all unfolding in the next few decades outside of, you know, uh, like assuming that Bitcoin continues to get adopted, which I think we're in agreement there. How does the system start to parse itself or change? Like, do you see a parallel economy developing, or do you see, the implosion of the legacy system? I don't know. Like, what do you envision happening?
Uh, tough to say, but I mean, a parallel system is starting to form. You can go to a physician now online and he'll give you actual advice about diet and lifestyle that actually does help you. And you can pay him directly, you can pay him in Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what his credentials are, it doesn't matter where he's accredited from. And that's just going to keep on growing and growing. And if that system wants to organize itself one day, maybe it doesn't have to. And what's incredible is with the internet, it's going to be a lot clearer for people who are actually benefiting people. The internet will show you that this guy is helpful. You have reviews for everyone. Sean Baker has helped so many people, and that's why he's so popular on the internet. This is how the new system is going to develop. And I mean, it's sad to see, but from how the way I see it, the current medical system is collapsing as we speak. Like, I am a doctor here in Massachusetts. Our hospitals, they're basically in something we call code disaster every day, which is they're just the capacity of the hospital is not enough for the number of patients. There are patients in the hallway every day. Patients wait for like 3 days in the emergency room before they go up to a room. And I mean, there are many causes for why this is happening, many, many, many reasons. But the main reason, in my opinion, is because we were not addressing the root cause of illness. And so it's just people are just going to keep coming back and back and back. And so I don't think this system is lasting very long. Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it's certainly not sustainable. And what I'm encouraged by was, I think the earlier question I asked you, what credentials do you look for a good study? And you said, I don't look for studies. I look for anecdotes. I look for healing journeys. I look for people that said, hey, I did this and I feel better. And that's incredibly encouraging to hear a doctor say that, because had I not dug into podcasts and Reddit and forums and Twitter, I would still be on medication that cost $150,000+ a year. And it's like anecdote is truth. It's so interesting how they've manipulated us into thinking like, oh, this person's healing story is like N of one. There's no scientific basis for it. When I'm thinking to myself, I followed this diet and I'm no longer on these drugs, therefore I healed. Wouldn't you want to be able to incorporate some of those things for yourself? But I think hearing doctors talk about the power of anecdote is incredibly encouraging. Ahmad, are you interested at all in maybe opening up your own clinic where you can work with Bitcoiners and people that you can teach about diet and lifestyle and a lot of the things that you've learned over the last decade?
Yeah, so I'm currently tied to my hospital because they're just sponsoring my visa. So I'm waiting on that to get resolved. But I am soon going to launch an online consulting service where it's just going to be one-to-one, just health advice online. And I think that's going to be the future. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to this because it's really it's been very difficult for me for the last few years, just giving people fiat medicine advice in the hospital, and I really wanted for my own well-being to be able to snap out of that system and actually help people the way I want to help them.
It's great seeing this evolution of medicine go online. Like, I really do see so much promise in the future of treating people, one, in a more nuanced and personal way, which it seems like we've lost. I know from personal experience and from hearing other people, just the intimacy, and this is probably, within hospitals and outside of hospitals where people are getting care at their primary care, it's like relatively quick, not as personalized. It just seems like there's a lot of technologies that are being built out, whether it's blood work platforms or certain technologies that are tracking sleep and other biomarkers. There's just ways to integrate this in that can help supplement some of what a doctor would be doing. And then having an informed doctor who has multiple disciplines under, different schools of medicine and can actually apply science as opposed to just prescribe medicine.
100%. 100%. I mean, I wonder on the long term how there's still an importance for the personal interaction, the personal touch between patient and physician. That's very
Definitely.
important. I mean, hopefully, once this becomes more mainstream, there are going to be more clinics like this, and that's eventually my dream is just to have my own clinic where I can just do these things, and it's direct patient to patient, and I give the patient the time that he needs.
Yeah, I envision a future where there's potentially a hybrid model of virtual care that people can get, but then also, coming in and having that virtual care can supplement some of the in-person stuff. But I do think that having an in-person relationship with a doctor is just very important. Like them being able to see you and talk to you about your health. Like there's no replacing that. And yeah, I think that both should exist.
Yeah, it's when I was in medical school, we would have like the biggest consultants come and we round with them. And these are the people like, he's famous throughout the city for being the top-notch cardiologist. And you see the way he does it, the way he makes people feel better. It just, hi, how you doing? What did you do this weekend? Just being personal with people. And that has so much value in actually making people feel better. You just treat them as a human being. But in our modern system, like, you're given 6 minutes with a patient. You really can't do that. And that's a huge part of why modern medicine sucks is give people time to talk, try and establish a connection with someone, and the quality of care is going to go up significantly.
Yeah, I would argue that from a patient's perspective, the being personable and having great bedside manner to a patient matters way more than credentials in the medical school that the doctor went to. Even for me, like I don't even need frequent calls, even if I could just be on a light texting basis with my doctor where they could send me messages about my blood work and things that I should be doing and I can ask questions. The issue is, to your point, I get 6 minutes with this person. I can tell they're thinking about 50 other things. They're getting ready for their next appointment. Oh, here's your prescription. Don't ask me any questions. And then he's out the door. Like that's where the issue comes from. I don't need a 30-minute appointment. Just be able to have some personalized touch with my doctor where they can answer my questions, even if it's over text. That's all I feel like I would need.
Yeah, yeah, and the system is just so complex and complicated, and doctors are so overworked that that's the best they can do at this point. And it's sad, and it's tough for the patient and for the physician as well.
Mm. Yeah, the doctors being overworked, I think, is probably something that a lot of people don't truly appreciate. Um, like the amount of different things that a doctor is working on, whether it's caring for the client, administrative tasks that take up a ton of time. Anyone in any sort of business role knows that administrative tasks are the last thing you want to do, but they end up taking the most time. And it's just balancing all these different things. So to even give the right level of attention is really challenging when their time is spread so thin.
Yeah, and also like healthcare in general has had such an increase in the number of administrators, non-medical personnel. over the last 20 years that it's just most of the expenses of the patient appointment is going into paying these people's salaries, and they're contributing nothing to the patient interaction. And that's part of the reason why the system is just so complex, is because there's so many people feeding off it, where it's just, it needs to be a direct patient to physician interaction.
Ahmad, I feel like one of the other great things about you is that you debunk the misconceptions around, oh, I don't have, this diet sounds great, but I don't have time to make, 2 meals a day or cook 2 steaks a day. You're obviously extremely busy at the hospital. You work a rigorous schedule. Could you maybe talk about the foods that you eat and how you prep them to make it fit your diet and your routine?
Yeah, so I mean, at night I make my 3 meals for the next that for dinner. I make dinner for that night, and breakfast and lunch for the next day. So I prepare eggs and some turkey slices for the morning. For lunch, I have some, like a piece of lamb and some chicken usually. And for dinner, I would have a steak and maybe some more chicken. And that's just the same rotation. It takes me an hour one day at night, but it's kind of relaxing. I'm listening to a podcast or something. I'm doing something good for my health, and it's that simple. It's cooking up some ground beef in an air fryer or on a pan, making some steak doesn't take that much time. And I mean, the way I look at my coworkers, the amount of time they have to waste uh, dealing with sugar crashes and going to get coffees and going to get donuts. And yeah, it takes me some time to prepare my 3 meals, but I'm so much more efficient at work because I don't have to deal with any of what things that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, we're talking an hour max start to finish for 3 meals, and you enjoy it. Cooking is just it's an amazing act to just be like very present and focused in the moment. You're listening a podcast, so you're educating yourself as well. And to your point, I mean, if you have an air fryer is one of the biggest cheat codes for anyone. Like today, I literally brought an air fryer into the office, seasoned a steak, preheated it, pressed a button, threw the steak in there for 6 minutes, and then I had like a gourmet meal that filled me up for the next 6 hours. So if you do that twice a day, that's literally less than 20 minutes for the best quality food that you can possibly get.
100%. And it's cheaper than trying to combine it with any plant foods. Historically, people ate plant foods because meat was not very easy to, animals were not very easy to husband, but it's become, we're so lucky that we've gotten to a point where meat is so easily available and affordable that modern cuisine is just, basically you go to a restaurant now, you go to a Mexican restaurant, they give you all the tricks that Mexican culture had for trying to save on making the meat given to so many people. So they're chopping the beef very finely and they're combining it with onions and they're giving you avocados. And classic Mexican culture did that because they didn't have that much meat. But at this point, we can afford, and we've gone to the point where you have meat available. You don't need to pay someone to combine plants with your meat just for flavor. So you're losing money by doing that, and it's making you unhealthy.
Yeah. So something I think a lot about is I think 16% of the US GDP goes towards healthcare related costs. But I even wonder, like, what is the lost GDP on just potential that we don't have by being malnourished? Like the businesses that could be started, the capacity to work harder at your job, like you're talking about at a minimum, you have energy to be able to fire all day long, whereas your coworkers literally feel like they need to pass out under their desk. That's why I think it's such an important mental model to frame these foods really as holistic assets, because we focus so much on the top line cost versus the benefit that you actually get from those things. Like you look at everything you're doing now in the Bitcoin space, the health space, that obviously wouldn't be happening if you didn't take your health seriously close to a decade ago and you went paleo, right?
100%. I mean, my increase in efficiency, I would say, is I am 3 times more efficient than I was before, 4 times. So imagine multiplying that by the entire population.
I, I even think, GDP, looking at it through GDP is a little bit of a trap as well, because like our energy is really meant to go into so many other directions, not even just like gross domestic product. Like, how about energy to go invest into your family so that your kids and wife are feeling connected to you as a father, or, if the roles were reversed, like you as a mother, or whatever the situation is, just having more energy to invest in the relationships, the work, um, other people outside of yourself. It's like that's what we're missing. We're missing people who feel compelled to lead because they have drive and they want to build family and businesses and all the other things that create value for other people. So yeah, on a little bit of a tangent, but I really do think that looking at these things through like Excel spreadsheet numbers is kind of part of the trap. It's your energy is showing up as the best version of yourself to do everything at an elite level and in pursuing excellence across the board.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally too, is I see this every day because the you really get to understand the problems with Fiat when you work in a hospital because you are dealing with like some of the saddest cases in society. People who have had family issues and end up on the streets and end up doing drugs. These people are in the hospital once a month and stuff. Older people that their kids are too busy to take care of, and they end up living alone and miserable and don't have proper nutrition, and they end up in the hospital at once every month. And they're all just problems of Fiat, problems of the destruction of the family unit, problem of the destructions of culture and society. And it's not looking good. It's not looking good. There's a lot of people struggling with this stuff.
Hmm. Ahmad, what do you do to try and cultivate a positive mindset in the midst of seeing a lot of these cases and these patients, and even being around coworkers that don't embrace this mindset? Because I feel like you are a fighter and you're continuing to put this message out where I think a lot of other people would get discouraged. It's like, I'm sure there is discouragement, but you also seem hopeful at the same time. I would love to just learn more about the mindset and the things that you do to still feel really good in spite of all this bullshit that you're working in the midst of.
Yeah, I mean, the key for me is you have to, if you're physically feeling well, you're gonna mentally feel well. You can handle everything. So, I mean, I care a lot about my diet. I care a lot about my exercise. I care a lot about getting in the sun. I care about a lot about my light environment. And so once I manage these things, I know that my mind is under my control. And this is for me personally, the main thing that the benefit of going low carb, going carnivore was for me is just to help with my mood. And I always had some issues with depression and anxiety. And once I fixed my diet, all these were gone. And so that for me is very important. If if someone offers me a piece of candy or a dessert or something, I just know that my mental well-being is not worth that piece of candy. And that's sort of my grounding. The other thing that this is I would advise anyone who's young is you need to have a purpose, something that you're passionate about, something that will you believe will get you out of this system, out of this conundrum, out of this fiat. And for me, I see the hope in, I see people commenting on my post. I see people learning from them. I wrote a post about statins, the cholesterol medication, the other day, and so many people have told me, "Oh wow, we were going to be put on these medications for life. I'm glad you're telling us about them." So having that hope, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, is also very important and very helpful.
Is there is there anything that you would say to a younger version of yourself, speaking of, talking to a younger generation, like what should someone who's 20 right now be thinking about in terms of building their future, just from the life experience that you have, as a doctor, as a Bitcoiner, someone who's gotten their health under control?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with you getting healthy. Maybe the number one most important advice is that stop treating food as entertainment. This is such a shift in mindset for most people, but it's it's the only way you're going to be able to be helpful in this world. If entertainment for you is what you eat, then good luck being good luck being relevant. So that's one. Yeah, getting healthy is very important. I think it's an important message for young people now is just being able to not be absorbed into the swiping and the dopamine addiction that it brings them. I think that's very important because you need to be able to have an attention span and you need to be able to sit down and work on whatever you're working on. And I think a good advice in that way is to read books. That helps because if you're able to sustain your attention for long periods, that's helpful. And buy Bitcoin.
I think that's an amazing list right there. It's such important advice too, because so we both graduated from university, and Harry graduated 2016, I graduated 2017. And so when you're 21 years old, even if you're not treating yourself well, everyone is like pretty much on the same page for the most part. And even now, 6 to 7 years later, you already see a massive discrepancy between the people that are going to the happy hours, eating the donuts, eating the Fiat foods versus the people that are prioritizing health and wellness. Like you can literally see it. And I'm sure as you get older and older, the gap just gets wider and wider. And that's something that encourages us is all these carnivores. You know, you see someone like Sean Baker, who's 55 years old, he's deadlifting 400 pounds for 18 reps versus the 50-year-old that can barely get out of bed. It's like, which version would you pick for yourself? Obviously, you would pick Sean. And I think most people don't understand how much power that they actually have. And yet, yeah, you might not be as strong as Sean, but you could be in unbelievable shape in your 40s, 50s, and 60s by eating the actual right foods through a species appropriate diet. So I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. I went to my 10-year college reunion last summer and I was shocked. It was I'm like, wow, you look like you've aged 30 years, you know? And most people looked worse than they did 10 years ago, which is just not good.
Yeah. So essentially, we need to get we need to figure out your visa situation so you can open up this practice, right?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start, I'm about to launch it very soon, online consulting. So hopefully we're gonna start with that and until eventually I get it sorted and I'll hopefully have my own clinic. And yeah, I'm close to launching a newsletter too. So some health advice and health information. So I'm excited about that.
That's incredible. The world needs more of that. I mean, just a world where, I could send someone like my dad who's in relatively good shape. He's worried about his LDL cholesterol. His doctor's trying to keep him on a statin and be like, no, work with Ahmad, who's actually going to talk to you about diet and lifestyle. And I know that he'll listen to you because you're an MD. I think about like the compounding effect of that over time. And I think it takes balls to be willing to do that as a doctor, especially when all your colleagues are thinking about things completely opposite to you. But I'm sure it's also encouraging connecting with other people on the internet, like the Bakers, like the Dr. Chafies of the world, that they kind of give you that tribe that you might not have while you're isolated in Boston, right?
100%, 100%. And I mean, I'm not a firm believer that like you could benefit more from someone who's read enough on the internet than from someone with a medical degree. But some people really appreciate having that degree, so I do have it for the ones that are interested in that.
Ahmad, one of the things that I really love and appreciate about you and your brother is just the directness into which you speak about a lot of these problems that we see in the world, but also just the framework that you guys also use in order to provide solutions. So gives me a lot of hope just knowing that you are out there, you're plugging away at your job up in Boston, treating people, doing the right thing, but also seeing this vision for yourself, being able to actually provide care directly within your own practice in the future. It's really exciting and encouraging. I know Brett and myself are both just looking forward to seeing what you do here. And, you know, in a short matter of time, I'm sure you'll have that practice open and Bitcoin will be even more further adopted. And the future will be looking brighter.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys' work with this podcast too.
Yeah, we're just encouraged by conversations like this, where I guarantee you at least a few people will draw some type of either inspiration, applicable information, start to make those changes and feel amazing. And we just need to encourage more conversation like this.
Definitely.
So thank you so much, my man. Hopefully we will get to link up in person at some point too. That would be amazing.
Sounds good. If you guys are ever in Boston, let me know.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.